What's up, everybody? Today, I can't wait to introduce you to singer, songwriter, producer Matt Hylom, today in the Yours Truly virtual studio. If anything could be said of me, it's what Food Truck Emily said in our recent conversation. And look at Christian. He's trying real hard. No doubt, in the last 6 months, I've put out, at the time of this recording, 45 podcast conversations with a total of 188 videos, which averages a little over a video a day. Some of that being multiple clips of an episode, multiple releases in one day. Nevertheless, you get the picture. You can't say I haven't been giving this thing the old college try, and I'm not ashamed of that. So when I get an email like the one I got from Matt, it helps me connect this grind to the feeling of meaningful work and connections reaching people who resonate I otherwise would not have. The opening lines of his email said this: "My name's Matt Hylom. I'm a fellow follower in the corner of the internet. I was at Peugeot's Symbolic World and remember seeing you in the audience. I'm a Catholic singer, songwriter, producer based out of North Carolina. My YouTube channel has a small following, 93,000 subs. And I've been releasing music for over a decade now. I'm looking to do a podcast interview in this corner of the internet to discuss my album, The Frame, which came out on June 24th, and discuss the various topics related to music, art, Christianity, etc. I just heard your interview with Neil deGrade, and it was great. If you're willing to have me on the channel, I'd love to jump into discussion of it, if that interests you. Thanks for considering it, and good work for all you've been doing." Now, I know some of you are thinking, hey, this little corner of the internet isn't some focus group to be sold a product or something suspicious like that, but I hate to break it to you. We all are. And we are all being sold something. Remember, Embody, there is no agency. So at least let's be sold by someone who actually understands where we're coming from. Hell, we might be all being sold a meaning crisis. Matt sent me the links to his music and other creative endeavors. His new album, The Frame, just released June 24th of this year. Not only did it hit many of my favorite musical sensibilities, I found in his lyrics page on his website something I had never seen from in this art form. Superscripts attached to his lyrics with academic and philosophical references in the footnotes. And not just any references, but from people like Ian McGilchrist, Jordan Peterson, Carl Jung, Jonathan Haidt, and Dune author Frank Herbert. So no matter what style of music you like, it's worth reading his prose to see where and whom exactly his art is being inspired from. Links to the music and lyrics in the description. Some of you may already have come across Matt from his cover of the Beatles songs, Let It Be, from nearly a decade ago, which has garnered over 50 million plays on YouTube alone. If this video is helpful, give it a like. If you want to keep up the channel, hit subscribe. And if you're interested in supporting this channel, consider one of 3 channel membership tiers. Top tiers members gain a voice to help build this little corner of the internet. So check them out. I look forward to meeting Matt face to face and discussing his life, where he derives deep meaning in his recent album release, The Frame. So without any further delay, I give you Matt Hylom, singer, songwriter, producer. Hi, this is Christian Baxter, and you're listening to Yours Truly, a place we go to think out loud. We are.
What's up, man? Dude, that intro was so professional.
I don't know. I'll say this. I've been doing these things live. This comes up, and it's like I don't know. I'm just gonna keep doing it. I feel like
Yeah.
it gives you my perspective, like right out the gate. It's something I've kind of put together, and yeah, that seems to make sense to me. And I kind of came from a place like I used to do a lot of church camps, and it was with an organization that was like a national organization. And the whole thing was really programmed, and they taught us even as young, like 20, 21, 20, like how to run a professional church camp. And a lot of those values like stuck with me, like in doing kind of big, box seeker church and all that kind of stuff. It's still it's still all in there. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I love it.
well, thanks. Yeah, dude. So that's how I came at it. How are you coming to this conversation?
I think the email I sent you that you read kind of encapsulates that. I have an album that came out in June and June 24th, and I just want to kind of dive deep into the discussions with people about some of the lyrics behind it, and just my thoughts on art in general and stuff. And I've been following your work for a little bit, seeing your stuff on my YouTube recommended feed from just being in the corner. Paul Vanderklay, Peugeot, and just all the videos that show up on the right. So I've been clicking through and been following your work for a little bit, and then I saw you at the Symbolic World conference, and I was like, oh man, I feel like we would have a really good conversation about this stuff. I want to reach out. And then when you had Neil on, it was like, oh, this is the perfect opportunity. He's already in like talking about music mode, so I should reach out.
Yeah, dude. It's a part. I've got the little keyboard, the little producer keyboard back there going on, and I'm not great at that, but I've been doing this stuff long enough to where at least I know how to have fun and kind of get my connect all that stuff. But yeah, dude, Symbolic World was huge for me. I didn't know exactly what I was getting into to a degree. I did, but for me, it was like a spiritual pilgrimage. That's the best way I can explain it. Like going to a place where I've connected to all these people from Jordan Peterson down. And after like looking into your work, that's obviously been like a big deal for you as well. So yeah, I wanted to kind of start there. What's your journey with the people from this corner, from this space? Like where did that start? How did that happen? Why?
So my my kind of intro to all this was really through my siblings. I don't have a like liberal arts education, or not formally educated in anything philosophical, the great books, etc. But my older brother is a Catholic priest, and my sister right below me, she has her doctorate in philosophy and is teaching at the Catholic school here at Belmont Abbey College. And so I've always been like interested in the things that they're learning. And I just, I constantly go to them for like, hey, tell me more. Tell me what I should be reading. I initially thought my career was going to land me somewhere in like the physical therapy space. So I got a degree in exercise science I graduated in 2011. But it was right when Jordan Peterson was kind of coming up in that 2016, 2017 period when he was blowing up, that my sister recommended him to me. It was like, hey, like, we're all talking about this philosophical stuff. You should listen to this psychologist guy. He's doing a series on the biblical lectures. And that started the whole thing for me. From there, it was like just the, one step after another. The way I've seen it is that, if I read something from, Jordan Peterson, I want to know who he's reading, and then I'll go read what he's reading, and then just kind of follow the breadcrumbs into finding more and more material to just kind of broaden my mind. So Peugeot was the next step from Peterson. After Peugeot's been on that channel for quite a bit, I eventually found my way to his channel, and then that opened up to further into the corner, if you will. So it was really just Peterson's biblical lectures that started the whole process for me.
Yeah, I mean, I love that theme because it really was like an unlocking of something culturally,
For sure.
And it's interesting to hear that it was your sister, because a lot of it has been coming from dudes, but it's like, hey, there's this this lady that's pointing you this direction, and so that's what kind of planted those seeds. And then so you're like, you mentioned that you were wanting to do physical therapy. It's kind of interesting. That was when I was like in junior high. I had kind of a injury when I was younger that I required some physical therapy, and I thought that was the direction I was going to go before I got into music, was physical therapy.
Interesting.
Yeah, and then I got into. I'm a little older than you, so like about 10 years, and that was when the modern like praise and worship stuff was starting to really like turn out, and so I really like latched onto that movement, and that's where I spent first part of my career. So when did music intersect with you? With all that,
I started playing guitar when I was a kid, like 10 years old. I got a guitar for Christmas, and it was always kind of like a hobby. Like I was obsessed with it. Like as soon as the first time I got a laptop, I was making beats, at 14, 15. Um, and I loved it, but I never thought it was going to be a career. So I was thinking more on the practical side of trying to figure out, what can I do that's going to pay the bills. Um, and similar to you, I got injured. I had a tennis injury. I like subluxed my arm and needed physical therapy, and that kind of opened the space to me to be like, well, I like being active, and I'm kind of a sports guy. Like I like just, playing tennis, playing basketball with people when, so this seems moderately interesting to me to pursue, and it seems like it could pay well, and let's just do that. um so it wasn't like this burning passion, but it was like, all right, this seems like fine. So I graduated 2011 and then applied to like a master's and doctorate program, didn't get in. But I had gotten married 2 weeks after I graduated. So the plan was like, all right, I'm gonna graduate, we're gonna get married, we're gonna move wherever. I'm gonna go to school, but then I didn't go to school. So it was like, all right, I need a plan B. And so I just took odd jobs for the longest time, trying to just make something work. And then I've been teaching guitar lessons through college, and so I was like, well, why don't I just really explode that and see what I can do with music? So I taught more guitar lessons, just putting flyers out in every neighborhood possible, and eventually just kind of trying to figure out more ways to make money from music. Ran into royalty-free music, which I started making beats for, and just commercial licensing and such. Um, and then in this whole process of trying to make something work for my family, for myself, career-wise with music, I started it reopened the like, oh shoot, I actually love this. I forgot this is a passion I've been like stifling, and it just kept calling out to me. And so, the hope was like they would be sick to do this as a career, to be able to like do it, like be my own boss and make music for a living, and make my art. And then so eventually I kind of had a crossroads of like, do I take a risk and try to like really develop my artistic side of my art, of my music, or do I take a business route and try to do this like licensing thing? And ultimately, I decided to pursue the licensing first, so that I could, in my mind, my thought was that I could have a career and not have my art be reliant on the financial success in order to continue to create it. So like, I want to create this, but I kind of want to do it on my own terms, and I'm willing, and I think I'm capable to be able to build a business out of this licensing stuff. And so I can do both. So that was kind of the plan from the get-go. And so that's been turning out well so far. I've been able to do that. I built my company, Morning Light Music, and that's been like sustaining me and my family, and I've been able to pursue my art on the side on my own terms, which has been great.
Yeah, so you had that initial brush too with the Let It Be cover on YouTube. Like,
Yeah.
so
Well,
that
so yeah, because I think that was the last cover I uploaded, because I had a whole series of covers that, again, like just trying to do anything and everything with music. I was like, let me try covers. Those seem popular. I'm good at editing videos. So I was just trying to put all my skills into one thing. As many, apply all my skills in any way I could. And so the covers didn't do that well until, actually, funny enough, until I started my licensing company, and then really learned how to use YouTube to my advantage, learned things like tags and metadata and titles and thumbnails and all that. And then I went back and like edited some of the thumbnails and metadata on this Let It Be cover, and it exploded. Like it's the most popular Let It Be cover on YouTube.
Yeah, it's
But
beautiful. I was telling my family about. I was like, I'm excited about this conversation come up. I think there's this cool. Y'all like this cover he did, because my
mhm.
parents, laws, they all like the Beatles.
Yeah,
So
that's
that
awesome.
was kind of fun.
Yeah.
And so yeah, but I liked how you saw the value in trying to create like some stability, instead of like just jumping into the chaos
Yeah.
of art, and for people that may not be familiar with like what Matt does is like you do. It seems like from like your some of the stuff I tracked down on YouTube, you do a bunch of your music like in the box.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got a drum pad, you've got your guitar plugged in the computer, but you're not doing like a full set or like a lot of these other things. Like you're
Correct.
an independent artist that uses like the digital technology.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's, I mean, even from when I first started doing stuff, that's kind of a new ability for about anybody. Like the barrier to entry is pretty low, and you were
For
taking
sure.
advantage of that early on. And um, I remember when I was first trying to like track music, and the one thing I couldn't get done by myself, was drums. And at the time, like the early 2000s, it was like drum loops. And
Yep.
it was
Yep.
terrible, but using the drum pad, and I think that's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. The technology's so it's just progressing so fast. And one of the things that I quickly ran into was like you can have all the technology in the world and essentially like, every instrument at your disposal at your fingertips, but there's still something like missing from just being able to play guitar live or, playing a bass live, playing drums for real. There's like a human feel that's missing that you can add into the song. I know like the Logic DAW has like the humanize button, which like moves the timing off so it feels real and all that. But it's like there's you can only get so far with the digital instruments before you miss something. You miss a gestalt, if you will, of like the human feel. No, um, I don't. I played in my church for a couple years early on, which was a good experience in terms of just playing music live with people. Uh, and my all my siblings are super musical, so I'll play with them occasionally on family gatherings, but not professionally. I wish I did. That's something kind of down the road that I really want to start doing is bringing other musicians in to record them and just kind of grasp that.
I was really curious about that because like Neil, he's older than me. So like all, this whole like garage band, like real garage
Mm,
band thing was still like in our living experience. And but like you did garage band as a concept was not something you really had to
yeah.
do like to get a
Hmm.
full like range of musical production as a result of coming into the new technologies.
Hmm.
And here you are kind of saying, there's a party that wants to start getting more into that opportunity. There's kind of a pop artist over on Instagram that I've been following who kind of has had a similar experience. Do you follow Brendan Bales on
No.
Instagram? You know who he is? Okay, he does everything in the box, real pop. He's
Uh-huh.
out in Canada, and and then he had like one big viral hit like a year or two ago, and then I watched him. He's like trying to go on tour, and he's like doing an acoustic act, but you're like used to this huge,
Mm,
like version of his song that's been produced in the box.
right.
And so it's an interesting like different I don't know, it's just
Yeah, yeah.
for me to watch that kind of difference take place. I think that's
Mm,
interesting. I wanted to get back into talking more about your music because I'm going to pull it up. I'm going to pull something up on the screen here,
sure.
uh, which is your the lyrics page you sent me. And let's pull it up here. For people that are only listening, I'm sorry, but one of the things I mentioned in your intro was that like on your songs on your website,
Hmm.
matthylom.com, you can look up his lyrics. And on his lyrics here, I think you can probably see there's these superscripts that are connected to footnotes at the bottom of his lyrics here. And
Hmm.
you quote things like Dante's Inferno, you quote the Joker films, Jared Leto and Joaquin Phoenix. Uh, you've got Jonathan Haidt, The Anxious Generation, Cain and Abel by Jordan Peterson, um, Frank Herbert's Dune here in the first song here, Muses. And then we can talk about your song Headspace too, because this song, you said it's already got like what 200 million
It's got
streams.
2 million streams. Yeah, this album is um I think except for the first intro track, is a compilation of songs I've released previously. Headspace being the oldest. That one came out in 2018. Um, and then most of them are from several months ago, that are released as singles. Um, but yeah, so Headspace was the most popular one, that kind of took off, and that has about 2 million streams now. Yeah.
So I'm gonna look up here. So like number 6 on this one, I've walked 100 times around this block tonight. You got that connected to until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate, Carl Jung. Like
Mm.
that's like where you're pulling these ideas from. And I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to highlight that for people, especially in the corner, because I think one of my first conversations I got on to some of these live streams that some of these people that are connected in this space downstream from like Paul Vanderklay was the question was, and this was a little bit before Symbolic World. It's like there's these ideas that have come down in to use Grimm's term in the wake of Peterson, like who's gonna take this and like infuse it into the culture more from the art standpoint. And we were talking about Peugeot's fairy tales, um and one of the people that I've had conversations with is one of the he's one of the comic book writer. He's the letterist. I don't know the right word for it, but for his god dog
Mm-hmm.
comic, Matt C on here, he did all the lettering for that comic. And and that was something, as someone that kind of has a artistic background, creative background, that was like wanting to see how this is going to affect the culture. Like you have to go up, and let it like come down. And so you've been working on these singles. This stuff's been in you since basically the beginning of the cultural phenomenon
Mm-hmm.
coming down, and you're an artist. And now you're really, it seems like with this, you're calling it The Frame, which I'm interested in where that title comes from. Um, Wanting to like really put this out and promote this to the culture. And yeah, so tell us a little bit. Yeah, where did The Frame come from, um, and your hopes like with connected to this space?
For sure. Yeah. Let's go back to what you were saying about trying to take this stuff from Peterson and then bring it down, particularly for artists and such, because the way that you read the lyrics, they're footnoted, but it's not like I took Peterson's lectures and was like, how do I write a song about this? Um, the best way I like to talk about it is that these are the things that created the atmosphere in which these songs were written, right? So it's like you have to start to see with that perspective in order to create art, right? So it's like I'm filling my mind with things like Peterson, things like Jung, Peugeot, McGilchrist, etc. I'm reading all the things they're pointing to and trying to expand my mind in wonder, and then I write from my perspective, right? But then my perspective is informed by the things I consume. Um, so I think that's the most like natural way to talk about those things, as opposed to trying to like top down infuse particular ideas into music. It becomes propaganda at that point.
Yeah, that's the you were at Symbolic World, like how Martin Shaw, you're talking about like hiding the gold in a sense, like sending people on a journey to maybe if they really, and just getting these ideas like in the atmosphere, in the space, in the airwaves, without, like you said, being explicit.
Hmm.
Because art, that's not what art is. Art is inspiration, and um and I think like, I mean, in some ways, I mean, I relate to that. I'm not the deepest, like, not coming from it super academically, but it's like I was telling somebody the other day, like in this space, when I tried to come back into like music after I kind of had this like life deconstruction experience, and or say not deconstruction, destruction, life destruction experience, and music took like a couple, like 4 years to really start to heal in my life. And by
Hmm.
that time, I wasn't like, I didn't know how to. I tried like connecting to this world online with music, and it just didn't like seem to make sense. And when But what did make more sense was connecting to the ideas of the meaning of the space. But it wasn't. So this podcast isn't like I'm an expert or that I can like pull all these things, but it's just
Mm-hmm.
like you're saying, it's just in the air,
Yep.
and that makes sense to me. Um, but I definitely do think that I don't. That's what was exciting. Was, I had this little conversation on a little stream at like 9 o'clock at night one night with people, and it's like, where's the culture going to come from? And
Yeah.
getting to see that. So like, you made your way to Symbolic World. Like, um, what was that an important thing for you to be a part? I mean, obviously you went there, but like, what kind of place did that event mean and make sense for you?
It was good to connect with people, to see people in person, to meet Peugeot in person, because everything these days is so like behind a screen. So it just felt more incarnational, if you will. Uh, yeah, it was a good experience. I made some good connections with people, and the talks were great, and the whole event was really moving. Like it in the same way that you would want to move away from technology to something more tangible and of the earth for the sake of it becoming real to you. I feel like that's what the Symbolic World Conference did for me, was like it became more than just like the thing I'm watching on YouTube or even the books I'm reading. It's just like real people talking to you and looking out in the audience. You make eye contact with people. It's just, you can't trade that for anything else.
That's definitely it's interesting because it's like, well, if you and somebody in your town the same sports team, whether that's high school, college, or professional, and you get together and you kind of have this shared understanding, shared experience of maybe you don't watch every game together, but you get together and you barbecue for like a couple of games, or you go
Mm-hmm.
to one with your buddy and all these kinds. Like with this stuff, it is kind of it's a consumption that we've been consuming. I don't know if you would call it entertainment, but it's something. And yet trying, whether that's because some of it's connected to political intensity or has been
Mm-hmm.
at times, or you're like, it's hard to find that conversation and that physical embodied relationality with this. And I think that's happening for everyone in a lot of ways, because I was talking to a guy in this space named Teo about how there are people in like say South Korea that are as big of a Chelsea fan, like football,
Mm-hmm.
um, as people that live there, but they're never gonna,
Right.
because of the internet, they can be like, this is my team, this is who but
Mm-hmm.
and they're probably like, there aren't that many people to talk to about that with where they're at, and but
Yeah.
because of the digital nature of connecting to this, it creates kind of a disconnect, the physical disconnect too, and that
Right.
is where we derive actually a lot of our meaning.
I think
Um,
that's why, Peugeot constantly encourages people to go to church, to form those communities. I'm blessed enough to have a strong community here with my Catholic faith. So I have friends and family that we meet regularly and we're talking about this stuff. So there is a place for, that seed to actually grow into the earth. Um, yeah. So it's again, like that human connection, that human conversations. Those are, you can't, you can't replace those.
so you said your brother's a priest and your sister is an educator at a Catholic university. Is that
Hmm.
so? Catholicism's pretty big in the house, like in the family.
Yeah.
Like, where did
It's
that
pretty
come
big.
from? Yeah, tell about that.
I was born and raised Catholic, um, and my mom is Cuban and my dad is from Spain, so it's just very Spanish. um, so we have a lot of that Catholicism going around in the family, but it wasn't until my sister went off to get her doctorate and my brother went into seminary that more of the intellectual life started kind of coming back. Like they started discovering these things, and I got started to get curious and wanted to deepen my faith in that regard, and felt like it provided more answers than just the surface level, culturally Catholic, um, that I wasn't necessarily raised with, but that was like the majority of of the atmosphere was like, you do this because we're all Catholic, and you do this because my grandparents did it and their grandparents did it, so you have to do it. And didn't really there was a gap missing, and I feel like that came later on in my life, but I was a saving grace, because I don't know if I would have maintained my faith in getting married and raising kids and then having to pass that down to them and giving them a why. And so much of parenting is like, you can't fake the funk. You have to know, you have to believe what you're telling them, or else they read it. They just subconsciously read all of that. So strengthening my faith in that way I already feel the results of that being able to be transmitted back to my children.
It's so interesting because you talk about like, you're Catholic because that's what we are. It's like this broad identity, but like where does it meet to the personal identity? And like, I saw that play out in like my wife's family. Her family, she was baptized Catholic as a baby. They ended up becoming Lutheran. Her family, even though my wife's uncle was an archbishop in the Catholic Church, she had 2 aunts that were nuns. Like, so her family, like, very Catholic. But her mom kind of was looking for the thing that you kind of talked about that you were able to do within the Catholic Church, which was connect to like a personal faith, as opposed to just a family, like a family identity faith, which I think that both of those things are important, actually.
For sure.
Like, if it's only about the personal faith and your family faith doesn't matter, just you find your own, that's not it either. That's part of the problem in our culture as well. And so,
yeah, it's almost like a subsidiarity thing where it's like, you need community, but you don't want to be a communist. It's like you have and then you want individuality, but you don't want individualism. So there's this hierarchy that has to be there even within your faith, of like, yeah, the faith needs to be for you, which has to be personal, but then you have to have a community, and then a larger community, et cetera, et cetera. So it does have to scale up.
I love that. That's and that really goes back to some of that early Peterson stuff. It was a natural thing to partner with Peugeot, and I can't remember the story just right, but Peterson was talking about, he was talking to the person, he was talking to the individual struggling, like, you have to get your shit together, like, you have to like figure that out, but it doesn't stop there. And and then Peugeot comes in and says, yeah, go to church, like,
Right.
those two simple, like, I mean, that's kind of a meme of it, but like that's what we're hitting on was these two simple but profound realities that our culture there was nothing in our culture telling us any of that stuff, and they were able to break through. I can't remember the part where Peugeot was saying, like, when he really got to meet Peterson and they made that connection, that Peugeot realized that if we partner like together, like, it's gonna create, like, people are gonna become Christian again. Like, do you remember that story? Was he telling that story at Symbolic World? I can't even remember.
Yeah, I believe he's mentioned it in Symbolic World. I've heard him talk about it before, where he had met Peterson before he blew up, because he was listening to him on the radio, and just the stuff that Peterson was saying, he was like, you're gonna revive Christianity. What are you doing? Like, you don't know what you're doing. This is gonna be crazy. Yeah.
And I mean, how do you feel about where we're at? Like, 7 years down, like, what do you think culturally? Like, are we still early in this? Like, or when we've been in it for over half a decade, it doesn't feel that way. But what are your thoughts on that?
I think we're early. Yeah, like, on the grand scheme of things, as far as history goes, less than a decade is not a long time for these movements to transpire. That kind of actually goes to why the footnotes on my site are the way they are, because I'm not, this is kind of a side, but I'm not technically explaining what these songs mean, as opposed to providing you with touchstone points to understand the language in which I'm speaking. And I think that the culture is not there yet. And so there needs to be a little bit of an explicit revelation of these things to reignite this atmosphere, which is, like, I know Peugeot has gotten that criticism of like, what you're explaining too much. And it's like, now is this time to be talking about these things, to reintroduce a culture and an atmosphere and a way of seeing, so that they don't have to be as explicit in the future. I just don't know if we're there yet. So yeah, to answer your question, I think it's early on, and I think that, you know, the question of like, how does this stuff that Peterson and Peugeot are talking about, how does this get infused into the culture? It's going to be slowly but surely, and it's going to be creating that atmosphere on an individual level with your families, and just continuing to build that culture, and that atmosphere builds over time. And then when you release a song or release a piece of art, and it speaks to those things, you don't have to explicitly say like, well, this comes from this idea. You just know.
Yeah. Well, that I would say that, I mean, I guess maybe your hopes in, you know, kind of connecting to this corner of the internet, to like that resonance will be there. Like you're saying, like, you know, hear me because I hear you, see me because I see
Yeah.
you, you know, like, which was, that was one of the cool revelations. Like, I know when you say, you know, like, yeah, I kind of follow along the corner, you're like, okay, you know, that can mean a lot of things. And then, like I said, when I like stumbled into you sent me the link to your lyrics, and I started like, oh damn, this is
Deep in
interesting.
the corner.
Yeah, it's like,
Yeah.
okay, this guy's like, he's connected. So I want, you know, highlight that on the front end. And um and so, you know, I think, and just you know, there was a guy, and I wish someone could like really connect with him. He's an Asian actor, and he put out like a video back in like January, and it was like a really high quality it was like spoken word music video, and he's talking about Jordan Peterson and all this stuff. His name's Jai West, and like I'll send you the link later in case there's like you have some connection to him, because it's a cool, it's the same kind of thing that we're talking about. And I don't know if he's connected to anybody other than just, was it YouTube, and he's on his own. Like, you know, I don't know, but continuing to kind of gather these people around to
Yeah.
bring forth, I don't know, you know, answers to meaning. I think that is, you know, and finding it in your own life. And and to that, like, you know, what is your well, here, okay, this was one of the things I was thinking about. So you start this business, you're building this kind of entrepreneurial endeavor, and one of your, I don't know, it's like in 18 and 19, you had like the most streamed corporate like background music.
Yeah, yeah. It was the most licensed song globally for like all of 2018.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it was kind of in the genre of like corporate yeah, so you like cracked this code of like the sound of
Elevator music. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah.
What was that weird, like, for you as an artist? Like, how did you deal with that in your mind of being like, this is basically selling to the man, you know, versus like I'm interested in how that was going for you.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've had like various thoughts around that, about how I feel about that business. Ultimately, it's a blessing because it provides for me and my family. But you know, to say that I like made the biggest elevator song in the world is not exactly like a cool flex. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I could talk a lot about, I can go a lot of different ways with this, because in a sense, it was actually listening to things like Peterson that helped me frame just, you know, doing the next right thing, clean your room, and, you know, take up responsibility. Like all those like basic concepts I've applied very explicitly into building a business. And knowing that, you know, I don't have all the information. Maybe somebody, you know, what's that rule that from Peterson? It's like the person you're talking to might have something you don't know. So like always entering into these spaces with humility. And I just, you know, reached out to people who have cracked that code before, and being like, you know, studying the craft. You know, it was like, yeah, it's elevator music, but there's a really systematic approach to making music that works for commercials, like even on the frequency level of making sure certain frequencies dip out where vocals might go in, and timing of when intros and outros go, and how long the song should be. So there's, it sounds cheesy, but it's like there was a lot of craft to develop in trying to break that code. So just applying the simple, just entrepreneurial frame of how do I build this thing to multiple aspects led from, like, starting an LLC. How do I create a catalog of music? Where do I promote it? How do I pay my taxes? Like, all the things. It was like every step was just kind of this disposition of, I'm learning and I'm moving forward in the best direction that I can, because I have these goals of primarily providing for my family, because that's my first priority. And then, making my art on the side, if God willing, that's an opportunity for me. So yeah, I mean, it was a blessing. Like, when it happened, it was like shocking, because my wife was working as a nurse at the time, and I was like, I think you can quit, because I think this is gonna work. So that was a huge surprise for us.
That's awesome for me on multiple levels, because I'm a nurse doing this, and maybe
There you go.
inspiration. So the other piece of that, because you said, well, you said two things. One thing that I was relating to, I've got friends that are in the kind of mainstream country and Christian industry as musicians in Nashville. I've also got my cousin. He's a writer. He got into the country music writing scene back in the 90s.
Nice.
And he had some success, like early aughts, and he still does a lot of like consulting and stuff. But the thing about it, you're talking about this craft, because even the most song that you might really resonate with, that got big and it just goes down deep, but it could have been some guys in a writing room in a session, like being really technical on like craft story, way that doesn't feel super emotional, like. And but that's the craft, and that's the work of something. And I think that has, like you said, the big flex of having a really popular elevator music song or something, like, but understanding that, and I think there's so much value and respect to be said of that thing. Even I even look at pop music that way, like, which would lead me to my other question that's becoming common on here, is like, what are your thoughts on Taylor Swift?
Taylor Swift. I was actually a big fan of Taylor Swift early on. Her Speak Now album I liked a lot. Yeah, she is an interesting phenomenon, obviously. Very prominent. I think she writes genuinely. And I think that the negative things that have come about from certain perspectives regarding her music as of late is because she's steeped in that culture, and she's writing what she sees. Like, she's writing in the atmosphere in which she lives in. That's all there's. So she's an honest artist. That's it. Yeah.
And that it's not. I mean, that's actually a compliment to her in a way,
Right.
And that's one thing that, when get people that are really having consistent success right now, like her and Ed Sheeran, is that at their like heart, at their like base level, they're songwriters. They're not pop stars. And I think that that's interesting in our culture, that's what's having staying power, and
For sure.
and like their whole work, like all their work is kind of together. It's not just handed to them, it's like a vision. And I think that's actually, I have a lot of respect for that. And obviously they're, their hustle and grind and all that stuff. But
yeah, absolutely.
I think that gets popularity sometimes casts a shadow on people's actual art or value, their value to somebody that's doing something. But I don't know, I agree with you on that. That's interesting. Neil had like lots to say.
I did hear about that. Yeah. Yeah.
That was fun. Yeah, like, so for people that were listening, how would you describe your music? And then I'll kind of, or I could, well, we can go back and forth on that.
Well, so when I have to release it for distribution, I have to pick a genre. So I just pick pop because it's the most broad. Like it allows for the most flexibility in definition as a category on Spotify. Um, but I write what I like. That's really it. Like, you know, I grew up listening, like I was kind of in a household that was strictly forbidden to listen to secular music. So, uh, nice. Um, yeah. So it wasn't until my early teens that I was introduced to like the pop world. But I had a friend who would, you know, show me songs every now and then. I'd get like, you know, the first time I heard like Jesus Walks by Kanye West, it was like, oh my gosh, what is this? Uh, Feel Good Inc. by uh, Gorillaz, songs like that that were just like, bro, what is this? And then having to just like deep dive into that type of music and just really like just soak it all in. Um, I don't know. I so the mix was like I wasn't really allowed to listen to secular music, but then my dad also had a ton of like Spanish music that he would always be playing. He also had like 80s disco stuff that he would always be playing. And so we had a very musical family, but it was just kind of hodgepodge. It was a very weird conglomerate of different things. Um, so I think that kind of reflects my music. That like I'm just interested in a ton of different genres, genre bending, and um, there wasn't anything one particular thing that's like you know I want to be a jazz musician, or it was like I want to blend all the things.
That's
Yeah.
definitely evident. And I have 2 points on that, which was, so when you say not able to listen to secular music, what were you listening to? Was it like Christian radio? Like what was
Yeah.
the okay, yeah,
Yeah.
we
Toby
have
Mac.
okay, you know, man, okay. Listen, when I was listening to your stuff, like because that was my background, but it was more like mid to late 90s versus
Yeah.
oh, so I was listening to DC Talk,
Mm-hmm.
but I was listening to your music and I was actually like, you know, I don't even know if I want to bring this up because that's kind of embarrassing, but I was like, I hear that in here.
That's
Um,
funny. That's
and
really funny.
I in my conversation with Neil, uh, Dirt Poor Robbins, shout out, you know,
Mm-hmm.
he's talking about like great classic works, classic rock, classic stuff, and I so much of mine was, and you'll get this in a way, is like a copy of a copy, or you know, like
Mm-hmm.
Christian music scene was always in a lot of ways trying to copy stuff and
Right.
not even getting like the real rock or something that was
Mm-hmm.
it was
Mm-hmm.
being like modeled after.
Yeah.
And now I don't want to throw that much shade at because they were in the studio. They had their own inspirations. Like, you know, some of those people were like, I remember the band Third Day. I read an article. It was
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah, we like Counting Crows, and I was like, oh my gosh, they listen to other music. Like,
That's
you
really
know,
funny.
it's like, yeah. So, but I heard that because for people that haven't yet listened to your stuff, you got these really beautiful, delicate pop melodies that sounded to me something like Shawn Mendes in there, which
Mm-hmm.
makes sense culturally, I guess, a little bit too. It's like, and then you like will drop into a hook, like hip hop hook.
Mm-hmm.
Then you've got like vocoder stuff in there that sounds, you know, very, you know, last, you know, the teens and everything
Mm-hmm.
that coming through. Um, I don't know, yeah, but I heard that mix of, and I was looking up like some older bands that were doing some of that stuff in the '90s that no one's probably ever heard of. This band called Reality Check that had
Mm.
like one hit back in the like one Christian, but it was like hitting on some of these flavors. Anyways,
Interesting.
it was cool. Um, the part of me thinks that I had heard that I'm not going to be able to recall the lyric, but it's that like you've got like a vocal effect on there and it's like octaves down and it's about like it may be the headspace one and it's that repeating line about the I can't remember off the top of my head. I should have written it down,
It's okay.
but yeah, I said like Shawn Mendes meets aggressive electronic hip hop hooks. That's
Aggressive. Yeah.
like because I mean the beats are, I don't know if that's
Yeah.
or not. I
Yeah,
never
I mean,
been
I
a
it's
guy.
it's so hard for me to categorize it. But yeah, I mean, huge like production inspiration is like Kanye West is huge. The stuff he does, the fact that he can like, yeah, enough said. Um, the what he's done in his catalog has been so like monumental. And I like to the point where sometimes I listen to his records and think like oh he let his intrusive thoughts win. And that's becoming more true nowadays, but for him. um but yeah, like it's just like you know, he had the idea and he went with it, as opposed to be like, oh well, there's nothing that sounds like this, and that, you know, not sure if this fits into, you know, whatever box that society is telling you to write in. And you're like, no, I'm just gonna do this. It's gonna sound like rock meets rap and whatever. And you know, whatever he's doing, that was just kind of the inspiration of like, I could have that feeling too, and just do it. um yeah, so him, and then more modern, like Billie Eilish, Phineas, her brother who produces all of her stuff, a huge inspiration. John Bellion, another like Kanye inspired genre bending producer. Um, yeah, stuff like that, like, you know, makes the hair stand up for me. And so it's like, and maybe it's not everybody's cup of tea, but it's like hearing that type of music is like, yeah, let's go. Like this is what I've been trying to do.
I love good pop melodies with big sound, and like
Mm,
I feel like you really capture that. I was so surprised because you know you sent over some of the links, and I was like going through, and you had the your Let It Be, which is this, you know, soft acoustic thing, and you've got this. I don't know. Don't let this come across wrong. You have kind of a delicate voice, like,
hmm.
and then
Yeah.
you drop into like I'm listening to some. Then I go over to your new album, and I'm like listening through the tracks, and it's like all of a sudden there's this like drop in this beat, and then you're
Hmm.
rapping, and I was just like,
Hmm.
oh,
Yeah, yeah.
it came out of nowhere for me coming like going that direction.
Hmm.
And it was really cool and exciting. And then you've got like tutorials up on YouTube of how you produce some stuff back, you know, probably 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And and yeah, it's really cool. And then so you have all that going on in the pop space, but like again, like you're saying, like there's this cloud around it that's everything that's from like this space, this corner, like
Yeah.
that's informing and infusing. And I think that is that's exciting. So talk to me about this. Was a question I had for you because this coming back into like leaving basically, like I was trying to do things like, and everything ended for me in 2016, like musically in a serious way.
Hmm.
Um, and so since then, there was kind of actually a change in the market of how people started doing stuff. Like, so you release
Hmm.
all these singles or all these kind of EPs, and then you release an album. What is that with because of the digital nature of thing? What does it mean to release an album now? What does that mean? Because I've kind of like, you know, used to it. It was just because this is how many songs fit on a CD.
Yeah.
But what does that mean now?
Yeah, that's a good question, because I also, right around 2015, 2016 is kind of when I, you know, pumped the brakes a little bit on the artistic side to be able to build up my Morning Light Music Company. And so I was releasing singles here and there. But during that period, you're right, like everything kind of did really shift. Streaming became huge. But yeah, so like even the concept of an album is, you know, I saw people during that period too releasing not albums but playlists. You know, it was like 20 songs that I wrote in a playlist, but it was like, it's an album, bro. Like the Spotify says it's an album, but you're not calling it an album, you're calling it a playlist, like whatever. Or people call it a mixtape because they don't want to say it's an album because that's too prestigious, and it's just, you know. So there's so many like swirling thoughts around what is an album. Does it have to be coherent? Is it a collection of works? I don't really like have a particular answer to that, uh, as to where I stand. Like I think it could be anything. You know, if you want to write a concept album that's like very genre specific, and has one idea that you're gonna flesh out into 8 songs, sure. Or if it's the last 8 songs you wrote in the last year, sure. Um, I just really think it depends on the artist uh, and their intention with it.
That's interesting because, like reference Neil concept albums on Dirt Poor Robins, and then and he and somebody like Taylor Swift who does still release albums
Hmm.
because they operated in that world. You
Yeah,
came in, as you're like saying, like as you come into the work into the operating as an artist, all that kind of is that old way. That isn't how you come into it,
yeah.
actually.
You know, artists like Nick D or Russ, um, they're they just have collections of singles. Like they've been releasing singles for 3 years, and it's like they got 120 songs that are just singles, and people add them to playlists, and that's how they're making their living. And maybe you have a coherent idea that's only 3 minutes long, like that's only worth 3 minutes of your time, of somebody else's time, and then you move on to a different concept. So it's like it's kind of the debate between like, do you write a 700-page book or do you write an essay? It's like, I don't know, like what are you trying to do? So if your idea needs 8 songs to flesh out, then sure. But if you have an idea that you want to get across in 2 minutes and 30 seconds, and it's complete, and it's just a thought about something, you release it as a single. Like what. I don't think there's like strict rules around that, and I don't think that there's like a level of like this one's better than this. I don't know. That's just me.
Yeah, because I mean, a lot of big artists didn't. They were asking the same questions. They didn't even know. Nobody really knew because it's like,
Yeah,
where are we at now?
yeah.
So I think one of the things I want to ask you about this is when music kind of went away from me. Music didn't actually represent only just like playing music or leading worship live. It was like you, I didn't realize it, but I was kind of operating like as a manager, as an entrepreneurial person. I had a band. I was also
Hmm.
helping build a church, but I was also building like this band that I'd been doing for like 10 years.
Hmm.
And the feeling was actually like, someone's like, I hope you can play guitar again someday. And I was like, that just seems like the tip of the iceberg. And
Mm.
to you, what does it mean to build something, to cultivate something? Because I think that's really like at the heart of entrepreneurial, even artistic
Hmm.
realities, is
Hmm.
like cultivating, creating, building. Like, what does that mean to you?
Um, that's a hell of a question. Uh, I think ultimately it just means to build something is to return creation back to God. Um, in the Catholic Mass, the the priest during the Eucharistic prayer, um, he takes the bread and wine before they're consecrated and says, "We take this." He takes the bread and says, "It's the fruit of the earth and work of human hands that will become the bread of life." And so there's this idea that we're all gathering elements of the world together for a purpose, right? It's like the ultimate artistic expression of taking something from the earth for glorification of God, right? For recognition of the Father. Um, so anything you build, whether it's an artistic endeavor or an entrepreneurial endeavor, has to be ultimately for God. It has to have that through line in order for it to bring meaning to you. Uh, I think, I think that people can find meaning in all sorts of ways, but if it's not connected finally, like teleologically, all the way up, then it kind of loses its substance, and it kind of loses its purpose as being built in the first place. So like everything we do, everything that we build and work towards has to ultimately lead back to Christ and then the Father. So I mean, I don't know if that answers your question, but
Yeah, it does. And because that then hits on like the fractal nature of reality.
for sure.
Um, that Peugeot has been trying to get that idea going, and because
Yeah, I think I could speak to that a little bit too, in that what really unlocked for me with listening to Peterson and then Peugeot, particularly in the entrepreneurial route, was that I had to sort out what my intentions were for art, for music, for business, for fame and success, etc. I had to clean my room, if you will, in order for it to feel like it flowed. And it ultimately, like, cracking the code on elevator music or whatever, like, none of that would have been possible if I was doing it. I think for me, at least from my perspective, I wouldn't have been able to do it if I was doing it for my own intentions. Like, we were joking about how, like, it's kind of silly that I'm writing elevator music. Like, it's something to laugh at. So it's like, if I had any element of like pride or I want notoriety, then I probably wouldn't even be doing that in the first place. So it was when I shifted to, this is for my family, because this is my first priority, because I am a husband and father and a child of God. Like, I had the full through line, the fractal, pattern in line. Then I was able to move and build something meaningful. Otherwise, I don't even think it wouldn't have existed. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Right. And that really informed then the artistic endeavor as well. It's like, are you doing this for fame? Are you doing this to tell the world something? Or are you trying to express yourself artistically for the sake of your own contemplation, other people's contemplation, perception of beauty, glorification of the Father? Like, that's it. Like, that's the full through line. But obviously, I'm not going to the studio with a sick beat thinking like, how is this gonna recognize the Father? Like, it's very, a lot more intuitive than that. But ultimately, when I have to think back and meditate on the day and sort myself out, you have to just make sure you have those things aligned.
Yeah, that's definitely been the journey for me. I have issues with addiction in my life that I've had to deal with, and even in coming into doing this, it's like, initial like dopamine and like, and like, it's kind of these waves.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm having these moments now where it's like, continue to ask that question, but also there's almost a point of, my first go around with this kind of stuff, like I was saying, like I trying to build a band and a brand and all that kind of stuff. I felt like I couldn't be honest about my true intention. I couldn't be honest that I really wanted to do this even. I had to pretend like this is just, this is my cross to bear to serve the Lord or something, like,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and that wasn't true. It's what I really loved. And even though, I mean, yeah, yes, of course I was doing it because I loved it, but I always felt like I had to kind of downplay that fact. Because if I did, that meant that it was an idol.
Right.
And, instead of saying something like, this is like allowing that love to be like, where did this come from? And let that, like,
Mm-hmm.
this is coming from like something true and something good, and honoring that. And that's why, even in the intro, it's like, yeah, I'm trying. Yeah, I'm trying. Yeah, Christian's trying. Look at the little Christian over there trying
Mm-hmm.
hard with this podcast, because, um, that's because I am. Yeah, I am. I'm trying, I even call this, like, my thumbnails, I'll say conversation craft. When we talk
Mm-hmm.
about the craft, it's like, um, yeah, that's all part of it. And instead of it only, trying to force it into being, oh no, this is only about the Lord, like the whole thing that's just,
Yeah. Yeah.
this is me in the world. This is a fractal of that table, of that communion.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully that, like you said, that tell us that purpose is like the ultimate thing. And I mean, I've talked about that a ton on this podcast, actually, uh, that I think that, you bringing it to the Eucharist was like kind of how I kind of feel about like the ultimate, like this, taking things that like the sacred art of creation, like and like going all the way to that point
Yeah.
teleologically is, I totally agree with that. And but yeah, this is that journey, and you like emailing me was yeah, it was like it made sense on that level, and it was really encouraging.
Yeah. No, that's good. Yeah, you are right though that these things can become idols, especially if you're being dishonest with them, because you don't really know what your end point with them is, and so you might be worshiping an idol that you don't know that you're worshiping. Um, but it's like, I know Peugeot's talked about this before, about how Dante's whole journey through hell, purgatory, and heaven is kind of a like fractal stacking of his desires, right? Like first he is led by Virgil, right, which is his love of poetry and the craft itself, right? So and he has to be honest, like, I love the craft. I am a poet. I am an artist, and that's what compels him forward. But if he stopped there and was like, Virgil is the sun that the love that moves the sun and the other stars, then that would be idol worship, right? So like those things have to lead to the next thing. But looking at the particular itself, you can still recognize that you have a love for that thing. So there's a vulnerability there, and then also a recognition that you have to know that one thing leads to the next, and ultimately to God.
Mm, the way,
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
maybe. Uh, it's interesting that there are people out there, making art, doing stuff, working in offices all over the world, and there's the same people are listening to Ian McGilchrist talk about the left and right brain. The same people
Mm-hmm.
are sitting there doing a deep dive on Carl Jung because they heard Peterson go and something hit. It's like that's. I think that's part of the conversation that I'm still trying to keep going, and
Yeah.
I'm glad that made sense for you, coming this way. Or like I don't have a whole lot else here, but if there was anything else that you were thinking you wanted to try to hit on today, I don't know if you have anything for me.
No, I mean that's pretty much it. I have swirling ideas about things, but I'm still sitting on them and ruminating on them, as Mathieu Peugeot would say.
Well,
Um,
bring one of them out. Bring one of them out.
um, all right, let's see. Um, well, so I was talking earlier about meaning and the way that we find meaning in our life, and having to um, connect it ultimately to Christ. And on the surface level, it seems that like when you like pop psychology of telling people to find meaning in their life is very much like, go join a club, play a sport, do a thing with people, have community, etc., etc. And I think all of that is true, but I think that it's lacking in the final cause of those things. And so all of the things that we do to find meaning, like, right, so like I play tennis. Tennis is more meaningful to me than it is probably to you. I don't know if you play tennis or not, but so in a sense, I'm making meaning out of playing tennis. And so I'm finding meaning in my life, right? And you can do the same with your interests, and you find meaning, et cetera, et cetera. I think that's helpful, but I think this is where it's like I'm at the edge of my thinking. I think that's actually what is warned against in the first temptation of Christ. In this kind of logotherapy, Viktor Frankl, find meaning in your life. That, as the way that Peugeot talks about bread being this meeting of heaven and earth, right? Of that multiplicity going into a unity. I think that that's what we do in our life. We're meaning-making beings, and we take the stones from the earth and make them into bread. And I think that the response that Christ gives to Satan is that man does not live on bread alone. That we don't live on just the meaning that we can make in something like tennis, but it's by every word that comes from the mouth of God, right? And so Christ is that word. He is the bread of life, right? So if we gather the earth for our own meaning and for our particular interests, et cetera, that's lacking. So we don't live on just that alone, but it has to connect from something above that's coming to us. We have to be informed by what the world means as opposed to just making meaning ourselves. And so there's this direct, I don't know, I feel like there's a correlation there of, the meaning crisis and all of that, and of how do we find meaning in our life. And, Peterson talks about like, well, if you act as if God is real, ... But then the follow-up to that is like, you should do that, but then also receive the fact that meaning has been given to us to understand and receive and then respond. We can't just bring that up, bottom up ourselves. We have to receive it from God and then respond. So it's not this kind of active making it from our own accord, but kind of a response to something higher.
Yeah, man. That is... And we're given the opportunity to make that a rhythm in our life through this day of rest and this day of worship, like that we can be reminded of that. That can be embodied, that everything we're doing can we can ascend that hill like every week to that point and have it given to us. And I agree with you in the fact that we're all trying to make meaning, and really the only way to do that is go make a buck and take a trip and post it on social media so that the world sees that your life has meaning. Like that's the cycle that I think that I see. And not that to poo-poo on travel and all that kind of stuff.
Sure.
There's a lot of beautiful things to see in the world, but like you're saying, if it ends there, I think.
But even in like noble things like raising a family, being in community, like all those things are good and noble and should be pursued. Like those are the responsibilities that humanity should take on. Like those are good things, but they have to connect to something higher. Like they just do, or else you're just kind of, eventually it just withers away.
Do you feel like that's where you think that ends, like, culturally right now? Why is it not going all the way? What's the words that you would put to that, to why it's not going all the way?
I think we just abandoned religion. We're growing more secular, so we've just like completely beheaded the teleological end of all of our actions, and then we're like sitting around wondering why we're in a meaning crisis. It's like you lost the meaning of life. Like, I don't know, you threw out the meaning of life. What do you want?
That to me, I would say something similar, but that like we're gonna try to put it somewhere.
Oh, for sure.
And so we're gonna make the profane sacred instead, because that's what that's who has the loudest voice now, or something, or we took for granted things that were sacred.
Right. Well, you think about things like, I think Chesterton talks about how like in modern society, it's not the vices that cause the most damage, but it's the virtues run wild. And so compassion is a good example nowadays of how compassion is weaponized, and those things have lost their through line, right? Ultimately to an informed understanding of what has been given to us and revealed about how compassion fits into our hierarchy. And so if you lose that top part, then even the good things you're pursuing will become idols unto themselves. But they themselves, whether you like it or not, are not the top, right, of the hierarchy. And so it's not going to follow all the way through. Something's going to break eventually when you try to compress the whole world into compassion. Compassion is not the Trinity. Like that, the being, the higher, the angel of compassion, if you will, is not a god to be worshipped. So it's like, if you make that the highest point, then it's going to implode. It just doesn't work.
I definitely believe that something maybe like, or the actual thing of sacrifices. I think that's the swirling around in the space. That's the point I came to. These models, these images of the altar, like that being the point of whether that's sacrificing, sometimes even being right, like to turn the other cheek or something, like, or to sacrifice, like you've mentioned many times, like for your family or for your neighbor. But then like where that, having that, we'll use the word one more time, the teleological end of sacrifice being something like Christ, being able to like take that through line. That's the father that gives, his life for his family, the mother that gives her body for her children, like that theme is like and it's not, compassion doesn't get you there, but that was for sure being sold hardcore, at least several years ago. I don't know where we're at right now, but like, right now, something in my mind, the thing that comes to my brain is like AI, but like there's other pieces, there's other things floating around. But yeah, that definitely, I agree with that. That's, we have these other things trying to define the most meaning in reality, and they can't hold it. They don't hold it. They're not worthy. They're not ultimately worthy of that.
Yeah, that's right.
That's a good one. You got anything else swirling around in there?
Yeah, I mean, no. I'm going to say no.
Yeah, dude. Well, man, I appreciate you reaching out, and hopefully this will like connect people to who you are, what you're about, your music, your art, and even like, like the intro music that I use on this, and I've got a little bit of branding stuff that I've like kind of played around. I've bought royalty-free music, I don't, now I know where I'm going to buy my future music from.
Yeah, I'll hook you up. We'll work something out.
But yeah, dude, that's been cool. And check out matthylom.com for the lyrics, and all this stuff will be down below. But dude, yeah, man, this has been fun.
Yeah, man. Thank you so much. I appreciate the conversation. Like I said, conversations and interactions with real people is it can't be replaced. So I appreciate conversations like this, and for the work you're doing.
Thanks, man. Well, hopefully it'll make sense to actually meet in real life someday, maybe
for sure
through some kind of like other symbolic world, something or another's, or whatever.
Yes.
And
for sure. Absolutely.
And so, that's part of this. There's other things going on in this corner, like estuary movements. There's one coming up in September up in Northwest with Nate Hyle and Paul Vanderclay and company. And so anyways, man, yeah, thank you. And hopefully we can circle around again in the future when it makes sense.
Absolutely.
All right, man. Hey, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning in and staying with us until the end of today's episode. Your support and digital connection are truly meaningful to me. If you've enjoyed today's conversation and believe that these discussions bring real value to your life, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. I'd also love to hear your thoughts, so leave a comment below and let's keep the conversation going. Your feedback and interaction are crucial in making this space even more meaningful. Also, I've opened up channel memberships on YouTube. By joining, we can foster a stronger community of connection and support the continuation of more conversation craft. Membership is set up to foster this in 3 ways. Level 1, connect via members-only community posts for channel feedback, behind-the-scenes moments, and supportive membership branding on comments. In addition, Level 2, get to watch podcasts a week before they air, along with other unique members-only videos. At Level 3, join scheduled, monthly focused small group discussions with other kindred spirits from all over the world. Thank you again for being a part of this journey. Together, we can cultivate meaningful, supportive digital community right here in this little corner of the internet. We'll see you next time.